Welcome everyone, Stealthy Sharon here. Today I wanted to go over some things I've learned along the way while playing Elden Ring. These tips are things that have helped me considerably with the game. As a player relatively new to From Software games, they may not be the best tips, but good enough to get started. There won't really be any spoilers per se, but I will reveal locations for a few easy to get items. If you don't want to be spoiled about anything, then you've been warned. Also, if you have any tips that are better or things you've been doing, then let me know in the comments down below. Anything can help a lowly tarnished in our journey through the lands between. First off, we have the item crafting system. Maybe this is an obvious thing to most people, but I'm someone who tends not to use any consumables in a game unless it's for healing. Elden Ring disabused me of this notion rather quickly. In order to begin item crafting, you need to purchase a crafting kit from Kale, who is a merchant in the Church of Ela, a location just straight ahead from where players enter the open world. From there, you'll want to keep an eye out for cookbooks. Some of them you can purchase, like the ones the merchant has for sale, but many of them are found through exploration. Once you have the ability to craft, you can make basic things like food to heal your horse and more ammunition. Eventually, you can make ammunition with various status effects, such as poison or bleed. Personally, I found that bone darts have been really helpful for me to aggro one enemy at a time. Also, fire grease has been my favorite of mine recently as well. It's cool looking and does a lot of damage. It's worthwhile to experiment with the different items and see what might help a situation. Experiment with the different Ashes of War. So what even are these? These are your weapon skills, and you can actually swap them out in exchange for other ashes that you've found. In order to unlock this, you need to go down into a small underground area at the Gatefront Ruins, which is along the Path of Grace and pretty close to the starting area. There you'll find a chest that will have a whetstone knife and the Ash of War, Storm Stomp. The knife is what gives the players the ability to mess around with the weapon skill system. There are a wide variety of ashes as well that have different skills. Some of them fire off right away, while others are triggered when you attack. And it's not only the different skills that modify the weapon, but also the ability scaling. A higher ability scaling will apply a bigger bonus damage if you have a high stat that uses the scaling. So, if your dexterity is really good, but you're using a weapon with a good strength scaling, then it won't be as effective. The other nice thing about the system is that you could swap between your ashes without the fear of losing them after exchanging them out. So you could experiment to your heart's content, with some of them having great use depending on the situation. To experiment with a few starter Ashes of War, head to the War Master's Shack, which is located not too far from the Stormhill Shack along the road. Knight Burnhall sells a few ashes to get early players started. Summoning spirits with the Spirit Calling Bell is something that sets us apart from other FromSoft games in the past. This system alone has made the game way more accessible to a lot of people, including myself. In order to start summoning spirits to help you, players will need to already have the ability to summon Torrent, which they can get by interacting with the Site of Grace by the Gatefront Ruins. From there, they should go to the Church of Ela at night to talk with Rena the Witch. She'll give you the Spirit Calling Bell and a spirit that summons 3 wolves. If for some reason you miss her or don't get the bell, then you could purchase the bell and the spirit summon from the shop at the Round Table Hold, which is a hub area that players get access to a little later on in the game. Spirits are similar to Ashes of War in that there are a lot of them, and it's up to each player to determine which ones are the most useful to their playstyles. So far, I've found a handful, but I think the most useful summon for me has been the Godric Soldiers. You get 2 of them, and I feel they were really tanky comparatively to the wolves that you start with. If you want to find it for yourself, then you could go exploring in the cemetery in Western Limgrave that has a lot of floating jellyfish. Just don't make them angry and you should be fine. On the topic of summoning, there are also AI summons that you could use that could be found outside of some of the boss areas. These gold summon signs look exactly like the summon signs for multiplayer, but you could always see them regardless as to whether or not you used a fur-calling finger remedy. So if you're someone that just doesn't want to play with other people, then don't be afraid to use these summon signs. These summons can be a huge help, but it does largely depend on the NPC. Another thing to keep in mind is that the boss has more health depending on how many people are fighting it, so it could potentially make him harder. So far, I found them all to be helpful to some degree. If anything, it takes the heat off of me for a bit so I could heal, or get in some free attacks before backing off. When it comes to difficult games, I'm all about making sure I have plenty of health or having more ways of recovering health. Really early on, players will start with some flasks of healing for health and focus points. Over time, you'll be able to increase the number of flasks and their effectiveness with golden seeds and sacred tears respectively. However, there's an item that can give you another reusable healing flask that requires a bit more exploration to get. Luckily, it's not that challenging to reach. If you cross the bridge near the Gatefront ruins and travel north, you'll come across the Third Church of Marika. It's here that you'll find the Flask of Wondrous Physick and a Crimson Crystal Tear. The flask is made up of a maximum of 2 crystal tears that can give you nice effects. In the case of the Crimson Tear, it refills your health by 50%. Eventually you'll find more crystal tears to customize it further, and maybe remove the healing effect once you become more proficient at the game. Also, while you're at the church, don't miss the Sacred Tear that is also there, which will improve the effectiveness of your normal flask. Both of these things are great to get early on for a bit of an edge over your beginning encounters. When you start exploring the world as you consult the map, you quickly realize that everything isn't immediately displayed for you. In fact, the entirety of the map's size isn't even shown, leaving everything obscured. Exploring into unknown reaches, start drawing rough contours, but it's only after picking up a map fragment that an area gets revealed. These map fragments are relatively easy to find early on in your explorations. On the map, one of the map's landmarks shown, even if you don't have the fragment yet, is the pillar where the fragment can be located. In the first few areas, they seem relatively easy to get to and are a huge boon to exploration. I've read that it's not always this easy to find the map fragments, but it should help with the first several areas many players new to Elden Ring will be going through. The next tip is to make sure to kill Teardrop Scarabs. They are these bugs that push around a glowing ball, and there's a little jingle you hear when you're near them. The game will tell you that if you kill them, they can help recover flasks depending on their color, if they're red or blue. However, you could also get items from these scarabs as well if they have a white shimmer. Sometimes you'll get crafting material to upgrade weapons, but you could also get Ashes of War and spells from them. Luckily, they're pretty easy to kill, but you have to be quick, otherwise they can disappear, causing you to have to rest and go back. So keep an eye or ear out for them. I'd say in most cases, target locking is great and makes this game a lot easier to execute attacks or dodges. However, don't be afraid to not use the targeting feature every now and again. Sometimes the weirdness of the camera when targeting can be a death sentence, and it's just easier to fight without it. Personally, I hardly use the target lock when I'm fighting on horseback, especially if I'm fighting someone else who is also on a horse. You tend to move too quickly so the targeting is all over the place, and might literally be jumping to something else nearby rather than what you're trying to fight. Also, large creatures like giants, I don't have the targeting on if I'm going to melee them. Use the messaging system. And not just reading the messages. Yes, as many of you are probably aware, you're going to be reading a ton of try-finger butthole messages a lot. But there are a good number of messages that are actually helpful, especially giving you an idea what's to come, or what might be around the bend. However, there is value in placing your own messages as well. If your messages gets a good appraisal from someone else in the world, then you'll get a bit of health restored to you. The opposite is true if you make a message that isn't helpful, but I've never ran into that problem though. I think the biggest issue for me is that my messages always get appraised when I don't need the health. So, hopefully you're luckier than I am. This one is pretty self-explanatory. Some of the areas can get pretty dark, and you don't want to be caught in a fight where you can't see what's attacking you. Luckily, you could pick up a torch early on from the vendor at the Church of Ella. However, this eats up one of the weapon slots, adding more weight, as well as taking a slot you might use to dual wield or hold a shield. To remedy this, try exploring the Weeping Peninsula to the south. There's a vendor there to the west that sells a lantern you can attach to your belt. It will probably be worth leveling for a bit and going there when you're more comfortable with the game, but keep in mind if you don't want to carry a torch anymore. This last one isn't really a tip, but more of just an FYI. The tailoring tools are used to change the appearance of some select armors. So far, I've just been able to use it to remove things like capes or other accessory type items. It doesn't seem to have any gameplay effects, but hey, fashion might get you in the right mindset to take on a tough challenge. I didn't know about this for the longest time, so I figured I'd mention it. And if you'd like to get these tools for yourself, then you could find them in the coastal cave in western Limgrave from the Church of Ella. After you beat the cave's boss, you'll get the tools as a drop. And those are all my tips that helped me out in the beginning stages of the game. Let me know if there are any others that you have. If this video helped you in some small way, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.